I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who plotted revenge. But then again, I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd be scammed by her husband and mother-in-law for 2 years straight. The day I married Jeremy Collins was perfect. Late September, leaves just starting to turn, and me, Sarah Mitchell, becoming Sarah Collins in a garden ceremony that cost exactly what we'd budgeted. Jeremy was always good with numbers, you see. That should have been my first clue. Marriage is a partnership, he'd said during our first date, brown eyes earnest over candlelight. Everything's split down the middle. That's the modern way, right? I'd fallen for those eyes, that smile, and most of all, that seeming commitment to equality. When we decided to move in together after the wedding, Jeremy said he'd found the perfect place, a spacious two-bedroom in the coveted Riverside Heights building, hardwood floors, and a view of the park that made my heart skip. It's a bit pricey, he'd warned. $2,000 a month. I remember calculating quickly. My 1,000 would be tight on my nurse's salary, but doable. We can manage, I'd said, squeezing his hand. Every month, like clockwork, I'd transfer my share to Jeremy's account. He handled the payment since I know the landlord, he'd explained. I was just grateful to have such a responsible husband. While my friends complained about their partners forgetting bills, Jeremy never missed a payment. The building was full of successful professionals, doctors, lawyers, and real estate agents like Jeremy's mother, Lori Collins. She lived across town, but visited often, always perfectly coiffed, always wearing that slight smile that I now realize was barely concealed satisfaction. Sarah, darling, she'd say, you're so lucky to have found such a financially savvy man. Some women just don't understand the value of money. They'd share knowing looks, Jeremy and his mother. God, how blind I'd been. 2 years passed like this. 2 years of me picking up extra shifts at the hospital to make sure my rent was always on time. 2 years of Jeremy and Lori's subtle comments about my simple understanding of finances. 2 years of them probably laughing behind my back. Until December 12th, 2023. The day the elevator stopped between the 6th and 7th floors. The elevator shuddered to a halt between the 6th and 7th floors, the fluorescent lights flickering once before stabilizing. The sudden stop made my shopping bag swing against my legs. Oh, thank goodness I'm not alone, came a wavering voice beside me. Mrs. Peterson from 8B stood clutching her quilted purse, her silver hair perfectly set despite the December wind outside. These things always make me nervous. Got stuck in one back in 82 for 3 hours. I'm sure maintenance will have us out soon, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The elevator car felt smaller by the minute, the mirrored walls reflecting our trapped forms into infinity. Let's chat to pass the time, she suggested, her arthritis-curved fingers adjusting her pearl necklace. You know, I was just telling my daughter about how lovely this building's community is. Been here 23 years myself. The air felt stale, and I could smell Mrs. Peterson's powdery perfume mixing with the lemon cleaner the maintenance staff used. A bead of sweat rolled down my back despite the December chill that seeped through the elevator walls. It is a wonderful building, I agreed, shifting my bags. Jeremy and I feel lucky to have found our apartment. Oh, yes, 5A, Mrs. Peterson brightened. You live in Mrs. Lori and Jeremy's apartment, right? The shopping bag slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, landing with a dull thud. I'm sorry, what did you say? Lori's apartment, you know Jeremy's mother. She bought that place years ago. Smart investment, really. Mrs. Peterson continued cheerfully, oblivious to how the air had been sucked out of my lungs. It was rented out for a while, then Jeremy moved in with that other girl. What was her name? Amanda? Andrea? Then she left, and now you're there. My ears started ringing. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed harsh, clinical, exposing every truth I'd been too blind to see. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, each beat seeming to echo in the small space. The metal handrail behind me was cold against my palm as I gripped it for support. Are you sure about that? My voice sounded distant, hollow. Oh, absolutely. Lori's quite proud of her real estate portfolio. She mentioned at the Christmas party last year how that apartment was her first investment property. Such a clever woman. And now her son's following in her footsteps in real estate. The maintenance crew's voices crackled through the speaker, but they sounded like they were underwater. I could see my reflection in the elevator mirrors, how pale I'd gone, the slight tremor in my hands, the way my dark hair had started sticking to my forehead with cold sweat. $24,000. The number flashed in my mind like a neon sign. 2 years of payments, 2 years of lies, 2 years of the elevator lurched back to life, and my stomach lurched with it. Mrs. Peterson steadied herself against the wall. Oh, thank heavens, she sighed with relief. These old bones aren't meant for such excitement. Are you all right, dear? You've gone white as a sheet. I forced my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile. Just, just a bit claustrophobic, I managed. The doors opened on the seventh floor, and Mrs. Peterson patted my arm as she shuffled out. Take care, dear. Give my best to Laurie when you see her. I watched the doors close, catching one last glimpse of my shell-shocked expression in the mirror. My green eyes, which Jeremy always said reminded him of summer, now looked cold and hard as jade. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd stepped into this elevator 5 minutes ago. That woman had been Jeremy Collins' trusting wife. This woman was someone else entirely. The memory hit me like a physical blow as I stood in their apartment after the elevator revelation. Last month's Thanksgiving dinner played back in my mind with horrifying clarity, every detail now tainted with new meaning. The Collins family had gathered at Jeremy's sister Kate's house, the dining room warm with candlelight and the scent of turkey. I'd been in the kitchen, grabbing more wine, when I heard voices drifting through the serving hatch. The market's all about knowing how to maximize your investments, Jeremy was saying, that smooth confidence in his voice that used to make me proud. Um, Take our apartment situation. Shook, Lori cut in, followed by muffled laughter. Is Sarah around? Nah, she's in the kitchen, probably trying to figure out how to work the wine opener. More laughter. You know how she is with anything more complicated than a nursing chart. I'd thought nothing of it then, had even smiled at what I assumed was gentle teasing. Now the memory made bile rise in my throat. I still can't believe she never looked up the property records, Laurie had continued, her voice carrying that slight slur that came after her third glass of Pinot Noir. It's public information, for heaven's sake. That's the beauty of it. Jeremy's voice had dropped to that conspiratorial tone he used when closing deals. Some people just don't have that business mindset. Sarah's sweet, but she trusts everything I say about finances. Remember when I told her the HOA fees went up and she just wrote the check without questioning it? The sound of clinking glasses. To financial acumen, Laurie had declared, followed by more laughter. I remembered gripping the wine bottle tighter, wondering why their voices made me slightly uneasy, but I'd pushed the feeling aside, plastered on a smile, and returned to the dining room. The memories kept flooding back. The monthly investment club meetings where Jeremy would hold court, dispensing financial wisdom while shooting knowing looks at his mother. The casual comments about my simple nursing salary. The way they'd exchange glances whenever I mentioned saving for our future. Last week's dinner party was the worst. Jeremy had invited his real estate colleagues over, and I'd spent hours preparing everything perfectly. My wife, he'd announced to the table, his hand possessive on my shoulder. She's an angel with patience, but I handle the money. Laurie had dabbed her mouth with her napkin, eyes twinkling. That's my son, always wanting to take care of people in his own way, too. I had blushed then, focusing on my plate. Now, standing in the apartment that represented their greatest joke at my expense, I felt the heat of humiliation transform into something colder, harder. Opening my laptop, I pulled up our bank statements, every monthly transfer laid out in neat rows. $1,000 from my account to Jeremy's, like clockwork. Each one a testament to my trust and their betrayal. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jeremy. Hey, babe. Picked up some clients' paperwork from the office. Mind if mom joins us for dinner to go over it? She's bringing that Bordeaux you like. Of course she was. Keep the simple nurse happy with wine while they plotted their next scheme. I touched my fingers to the screen, tracing his message. 2 years of lies. 2 years of mockery. 2 years of them underestimating exactly what this simple nurse was capable of. Sounds perfect, I replied, adding a kiss emoji. I'll make that pasta she loves. Setting down my phone, I opened a new browser tab. Property records first, then tenant rights, then fraud statutes. By the time they arrived for dinner, I'd have the beginnings of a plan that would wipe those condescending smiles off their faces forever. They thought I was financially naive? I smiled, a cold expression that would have shocked anyone who knew me. Time to show them exactly how expensive underestimating me could be. The first thread came loose thanks to Mrs. Peterson's big mouth. After our elevator encounter, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Then Jeremy moved in with that other girl. That night, while Jeremy was at his client meeting, I did something I'd never done before. I went through his desk. Behind the carefully organized files of current clients, I found an old leather planner from 2019. Inside, tucked between pages, was a photograph. Jeremy, younger and clean-shaven, with his arm around a woman in front of our apartment building. On the back, written in his familiar scrawl, "Moving day with Anna, 5A." Anna, not Amanda. Mrs. Peterson had gotten the name wrong. A quick social media search revealed Anna Chen, financial analyst. Her Instagram showed she'd lived in our building 3 years ago. Her photos tagged with Riverside Heights and 5A, the same apartment, the same man, probably the same scam. It took 3 days to work up the courage to contact her. When I did, I kept it professional, sending a carefully worded LinkedIn message. Ms. Chen, I'm currently living in apartment 5A at Riverside Heights. I believe we need to talk about Jeremy Collins and Lori Collins. Her response came within hours. Starbucks on 7th, tomorrow, 7 a.m. After sending the message to Anna Chen, I spent the rest of the evening in a state of carefully concealed panic. Every notification sound made my heart jump, but I couldn't risk checking my phone too obviously. Jeremy was sprawled on the couch, our couch, that I'd helped pick out, probably paid for with other women's rent money, watching the basketball game. You're quiet tonight, babe, he said during a commercial break, looking over at me with what I used to think was affection. Now I saw the calculation behind his warm, brown eyes. Just tired, I replied, forcing my hands to stay steady as I folded laundry. Long shift at the hospital. You work too hard, he said, and had the audacity to add, good thing you have me to handle the practical stuff, hey? I managed a weak laugh, the same laugh I'd given all those times he'd made similar comments. Amazing how different it sounded now that I knew the truth. Yeah, lucky me. My phone buzzed. New LinkedIn message. Work stuff? Jeremy asked, a slight edge to his voice. Always so careful to monitor my communications, I realized. How had I never noticed that before? Just the hospital schedule for next week, I lied smoothly, surprising myself with how easily it came. Then again, I'd learned from the best, hadn't I? I waited until he was engrossed in the game again before checking the message. Anna's response glowed on my screen. Starbucks on 7th, tomorrow, 7 a.m. I'm gonna head to bed, I announced, keeping my voice level. Early shift tomorrow. Jeremy made a sympathetic noise. Poor baby. Want me to bring you lunch at the hospital? The thought of sitting across from him in the hospital cafeteria, pretending everything was normal while knowing what I knew, made my stomach turn. No need, I said, pressing a kiss to his cheek like I'd done 1,000 times before. We're having a staff lunch meeting. In our bedroom, their bedroom, really, since they owned it, I changed into pajamas with trembling fingers. 7 a.m. couldn't come fast enough. As I laid in bed beside my husband, listening to his steady breathing, I wondered how many other women had slept here, in this room, beside this man, not knowing they were just another mark in his and his mother's long con. Sleep didn't come easily that night, but that was okay. I'd learned during my nursing training that sometimes the most important thing isn't rest. Sometimes it's staying alert enough to catch the first signs of something going very, very wrong. And tomorrow morning at 7, I'd start gathering those symptoms, one coffee chat at a time. Amanda was everything I wasn't: sleek, corporate, with perfectly manicured nails that clicked against her coffee cup as she told her story. 15 months, she said, her voice tight. 15 months of paying rent before I found the property records. When I confronted him, he and Lori turned it around on me. Said I was financially irresponsible, that they were teaching me about money management. She laughed bitterly. I was a financial analyst, for God's sake. Were there others? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Before me? Rachel Winters. She works at Citibank now. After what they did to her, she went back to school, got her MBA. Last I heard, she's their youngest vice president. That afternoon, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. The library's public computers felt safer than using my home laptop. Property records, tax assessments, LLC filings, they all told a story. Lori Collins owned 6 properties through various shell companies. The apartment was just the beginning. Rachel Winters agreed to meet me after work. Unlike Amanda's controlled anger, Rachel's rage was still raw. 3 years, she said, her fingers white around her wine glass. 3 years of paying them, thinking I was building a future. You know what they did with my money? Bought the Richardson Street property. The one they used to scam the next girl. My stomach churned. How many properties does Lori actually own? Rachel's smile was razor sharp. Officially, 3. Unofficially, I've tracked at least 6. And guess what? Not a single rental income reported to the IRS. I would know. I handle tax fraud cases for the bank now. That night, I created a spreadsheet. Property addresses, purchase dates, shell company names. A pattern emerged. Buy property, move Jeremy in with girlfriend, collect rent, use money to buy next property. Rinse, repeat. But Lori had gotten sloppy. The Richardson Street Properties LLC had paperwork errors. The Maple Avenue condos tax assessments didn't match the city records. Small discrepancies that only someone looking for them would notice. My phone buzzed. Jeremy, working late tonight, babe. Big client meeting. Don't wait up. I looked at our wedding photo on the wall, at his practiced smile, at my trusting one. Then I opened my email and began composing a message to the IRS whistleblower office. The next day, I met with both Amanda and Rachel for lunch. 3 women, 3 stories, one common thread of betrayal. But as we talked, something else emerged: expertise. Amanda's financial analysis skills, Rachel's banking knowledge, my attention to detail. Together, we weren't victims. We were a task force. They're getting ready to buy another property, Rachel said, sliding over some bank documents. Lori's been moving money around, setting up a new LLC. Let me guess, Amanda added. Jeremy's been talking about making smart investments, about how the market's perfect right now. I thought about the contracts they'd brought to dinner, the ones they discussed in those knowing tones while I served the pasta. Yes, and they really don't have much time, Rachel said, pulling out her laptop. But we have something they don't. What's that? I asked. Amanda and Rachel exchanged looks. Evidence, they said in unison. I felt a smile spread across my face, not the sweet, trusting one I'd worn in that wedding photo, but something sharper, something dangerous. Ladies, I said, opening my own laptop, let's get to work. By the time I returned home that evening, we had a plan. Jeremy and Lori thought they were the only ones who knew how to play the long game. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I heard his key in the door as I finished typing up our findings. Hey, babe, he called out. Miss me? Rividolvi, I replied, closing my laptop with a soft click. How was your meeting? Great, he said, loosening his tie. Actually, Mom and I have an exciting investment opportunity to discuss with you. I bet you do, I thought, but smiled sweetly. Can't wait to hear all about it. The game was on, and this time I knew all the rules. Being a nurse taught me one crucial thing: patience. Sometimes you have to watch and wait, monitoring vital signs before making your move. My first vital sign came from Jeremy's own carelessness. He'd logged into his email on my laptop months ago, and like most overconfident people, he'd never logged out. The emails between him and Lori made me physically sick. Sarah handed over her rent again, he'd written 3 months ago. Like clockwork, sometimes I feel almost bad about how easy this is. Almost. Lori's response: Don't get sentimental, darling. Remember, we're teaching these girls valuable lessons about financial responsibility. Besides, the Richardson Street property needs renovations, and these payments are funding our next venture. I forwarded everything to a secure email account I'd created at the library. Then I started laying my trap. To Jeremy, I said over dinner one night, pushing my food around my plate. I've been thinking about what you said about investments. Maybe, maybe I should learn more. You're so good with money, and I want to understand it better. The look he exchanged with his mother across the table would have been comical if it wasn't so infuriating. Of course, darling, Lori exclaimed, reaching for her wine. We should include Sarah in our investment group, Jeremy. She's family, after all. I recorded that entire dinner conversation on my phone, hidden in my apron pocket. Their casual mentions of creative financing and unofficial income streams would prove invaluable later. The next phase was trickier. I needed Jeremy to brag about their scheme in writing. So I played dumb, really dumb. Baby, I texted him one afternoon. Mrs. Peterson said something weird about the apartment belonging to your mom. I'm sure I misunderstood. His response took 12 minutes. I imagined him crafting it carefully, or maybe consulting Lori. LOL, Peterson's getting senile. Mom helped us find the place because of her real estate connections. That's all. Don't worry your pretty head about it. I pressed harder. Oh, thank goodness. I was worried we weren't really paying rent or something crazy. That's when his arrogance got the better of him. Well, technically, the money does go to Mom, but that's just smart business, babe. We keep the money in the family instead of throwing it away on some random landlord. I'm protecting our future. You get it, right? Screenshot, save, forward to secure email. The investment group meetings were the hardest part. Sitting there, listening to them detail their schemes while pretending to be impressed. But it gave me access. I planted a small recording device, courtesy of Rachel's bank connections, in Lori's designer handbag during one of our girls' lunches. The recordings were damning. The beauty is, Lori had said during one car ride with Jeremy, none of these properties show rental income. As far as the IRS knows, they're all personal residences. The cash just disappears. While they planned their next property acquisition, I planned their downfall. Rachel helped me prepare a detailed report for the IRS whistleblower office. Amanda used her financial analyst skills to document every fraudulent transaction. The final touch came from an unexpected source. During another investment meeting, I noticed one of Jeremy's colleagues, David, looking uncomfortable during discussions of their creative accounting. Over coffee the next day, David confirmed my suspicions. They've been running these schemes for years, he admitted. I've wanted to report it, but Lori has influence in the real estate community. What if he didn't have to? I asked. What if someone else had already gathered all the evidence? 2 days later, an anonymous tip about years of unreported rental income landed on the IRS investigator's desk, corroborating every detail in my whistleblower report. That evening, Jeremy came home excited. Baby, Mom and I have been thinking, with your new interest in real estate, maybe it's time to bring you in on something bigger. We're planning to acquire a luxury condo building. Very exclusive deal. I looked up from my laptop where I'd just finished encrypting the last batch of evidence. Really? I'd love to hear all about it. Great. Mom's bringing the paperwork tomorrow. We'll walk you through everything. I smiled, thinking of the IRS agents who would be very interested in those papers. Perfect timing. I think I'm finally ready to learn all about the family business. They had no idea just how ready I was. The thing about con artists is that they never expect to be conned, especially not by someone they've written off as financially naive. Rachel's banking connections, Amanda's financial expertise, and my newfound taste for revenge combined to create the perfect storm. I have a friend from the hospital. I mentioned casually over Sunday brunch. Her uncle's looking to quietly sell his condo building before his divorce. Says he needs to move fast, keep it off market. Made me think of you two immediately. The way Jeremy and Lori's eyes lit up was almost predatory, almost exactly like they'd looked when they'd first shown me apartment 5. Sarah, darling, Lori purred. How interesting. Tell us more. The bait was set. Over the next 2 weeks, I fed them details about the fictional Aurora Heights, 12 luxury units, prime location, desperate seller. Rachel had created impeccable paperwork through her banking contacts. Amanda had run the numbers to make them irresistible. The catch is, I said during one of our strategy sessions, watching their faces carefully, he wants earnest money, significant earnest money, to prove we're serious. How much? Jeremy asked, trying to sound casual while his eyes gleamed. 200,000. Lori nearly choked on her wine. That's substantial. But think about it, I pressed, using the same tone Jeremy had used on me countless times. 12 units, prime location, at 30% below market value? We could do exactly what you did with the other properties, Mom. The mom was calculated, so was my next move. Unless you don't think we can afford it? I know I'm still learning about real estate investments, but no, Lorraine interrupted exactly as I'd predicted. We can make it work. We have resources. Over the next week, I watched them liquidate assets and pull money from their various hidden accounts. Each transaction carefully documented by Rachel's team at the bank. The real genius came from Amanda. They need to believe they're the smartest people in the room, she'd said during one of our planning sessions. Let them think they're going to scam the seller, not the other way around. So I played uncertain, asked basic questions about real estate transactions, made them explain their creative financing methods repeatedly, each explanation more detailed than the last, each one recorded and documented. The meeting with the potential investors was held in an upscale restaurant's private room. Rachel had arranged for 2 IRS investigators posing as foreign investors to attend. I'd suggested Lori bring her real estate license renewal paperwork to sign during dinner. Just to save time, Mom. The key to success in real estate, Lori explained to the investors after her 3rd glass of wine, is understanding how to maximize every property's potential. Take our Riverside Heights unit, for example. My hand tightened around my water glass, but I kept my face neutral. We acquired that property years ago. she continued, sharing a knowing look with Jeremy. Through some creative financing methods, we've managed to turn it into quite the profitable investment. Haven't we, Jeremy? Absolutely, Mom, Jeremy agreed, swirling his whiskey. It's all about finding the right payment structure. Fascinating, one investigator said, leaning forward. And how exactly does this payment structure work? Well, Lori smiled, the wine loosening her usual careful demeanor. Uh, let's just say we've developed a system that keeps the money within the family while minimizing certain reporting requirements. Smart, the other investigator nodded. Very smart. And this system, you use it with other properties as well? Jeremy jumped in, eager to impress. We've refined it over the years. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when you think outside traditional lending and rental frameworks. I sat quietly, phone recording in my purse, watching my mother-in-law sign her real estate license renewal forms between carefully worded admissions of fraud. They were too clever to outright admit their schemes, but too arrogant to realize how incriminating their careful euphemisms were. The earnest money needs to be transferred tomorrow, I reminded them as dinner wound down. The seller's getting antsy. Don't worry, sweetheart, Jeremy said, squeezing my shoulder. Mom and I have it handled. This time tomorrow, we'll be on our way to owning Aurora Heights. I smiled, thinking of the sealed documents waiting at Rachel's bank. This time tomorrow, I agreed. Everything will be different. They had no idea how right I was. That night, as I watched Jeremy transfer their earnest money into what he thought was an escrow account, actually a forensic accounting trap set up by Rachel, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow would bring chaos, but tonight, I savored the quiet before the storm. I'm so proud of you, Jeremy said, closing his laptop. Finally taking an interest in the family business. I kissed his cheek, tasting the victory to come. Well, you know what they say, keep your friends close. Them and your family closer, he finished, missing my point entirely. I slept surprisingly well that night, dreaming of tomorrow's reckoning. The last time I'd check our bank account balance, their earnest money had just cleared. By this time tomorrow, that money would be evidence in a fraud investigation, and Lori's real estate license renewal would be the least of her problems. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about getting even, it's about making sure they never recover. The grand ballroom at the Riverside Hotel seemed fitting, expensive, elegant, and most importantly, public. I'd chosen it carefully, just as I'd chosen my outfit. A sleek black dress that made me look more like a CEO than a nurse. The kind of dress Lori would approve of, right until the moment everything fell apart. Everything's ready, Rachel texted from the hotel lobby. Guests arriving. I checked my reflection one last time. Showtime, I whispered. The guest list had been a masterpiece of careful planning. My parents arrived first, confused but pleased by the apparent celebration. Jeremy's family trickled in next, including his sister Kate, who had always been quick to laugh at Lori's jokes about my financial naivete. The real estate board members came promptly at 7, led by Chairman Douglas Wright, who'd known Lori for 20 years. The local news crew set up discreetly in the corner. They thought they were covering a story about successful women in real estate, focusing on the dynamic mother-son duo revolutionizing the local market. Jeremy and Lori arrived last, of course. They loved making an entrance. Sarah, darling, Lori air-kissed my cheek. This is absolutely lovely, though I must say it seems rather elaborate for a simple investment announcement. Oh, Mom, I smiled. Tonight is about so much more than that. The first hint that something was wrong came during dinner. I watched Jeremy's face change the moment he saw Anna Chen, his easy smile faltering, then freezing completely when he spotted Rachel Winters across the table. The blood drained from his face as he grabbed Lori's arm, whispering something urgent in her ear. Lori's perfectly lined eyes widened as she took in the presence of her son's exes. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down her wine glass, her usual poise cracking just enough for me to notice. Jeremy spent the next 3 courses in barely concealed panic, his eyes darting between Anna and Rachel, then to the exit, then to me. He barely touched his food, instead typing frantically under the table, probably trying to access accounts he'd soon learn were already frozen. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked innocently, touching his arm. "You've hardly touched your steak." "Fine," he managed, his voice tight. "Just surprised to see some familiar faces." "Oh," I smiled. "Well, I thought it was important to have everyone here for the big announcement. After all, they're part of the family business too, aren't they?" The look he gave me then, part realization, part fear, told me he was finally beginning to understand exactly what kind of dinner this was. I waited until the dessert plates were cleared. Lori was in the middle of regaling the table with stories of her real estate prowess when I stood, gently tapping my glass with a spoon. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady. "We're here to celebrate a remarkable achievement in real estate investment." I paused, meeting Lori's approving smile. "Just not the one you think." The screen behind me flickered to life. Property records, bank statements, email threads, text messages. 2 years ago, I married a man who, along with his mother, had perfected a particular type of real estate investment. My voice carried through the suddenly silent room. One that involved convincing women to pay rent on properties they already owned. Lori's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Jeremy started to stand, but Rachel's quiet, "I wouldn't," stopped him cold. But I wasn't their first victim. I gestured to Anna and Rachel. "Would you ladies like to share your stories?" The next 10 minutes were devastating. Each woman detailed their experiences, dates, amounts, conversations. The real estate board members leaned forward, faces darkening. The news crew had abandoned any pretense of discretion, cameras rolling openly now. "Of course," I continued, "the unpaid taxes on these illegal rent collections caught the IRS's attention." I nodded to the agents who stood, as did the fraudulent property records submitted to the real estate board. "This is ridiculous," Lori sputtered, but her voice lacked its usual authority. "Jeremy, tell them—" "Tell them what, Mom?" I interrupted, clicking to the next slide. "About the recorded conversations with your investors last week? Or should we discuss the earnest money you transferred yesterday? The money that's now frozen pending federal investigation?" The room erupted in chaos. Jeremy's sister Kate knocked over her wine glass. My father stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. The real estate board members were already huddled, whispered conversations carrying words like license revocation and immediate suspension. "Sarah," Jeremy tried, using his smooth business voice. "Baby, let's talk about this. Like we talked about the rent, or like you talked about me with your mother, all those jokes about your financially naive wife." I played the recording from their dinner with the undercover agents. Their own voices filled the room, dripping with smug superiority as they detailed their creative financing methods. Lori's face had gone from red to white. She was staring at the real estate license renewal forms displayed on the screen, the ones she'd signed during that same dinner, now marked with timestamps and witness signatures. "Mrs. Collins," Chairman Wright's voice cut through the chaos, "the board will require your immediate surrender of your real estate license pending full investigation." And Mr. Collins, one of the IRS agents, added, "We'll need you to come with us to discuss several discrepancies in your tax filings." I watched it all unfold, the IRS agents leading Jeremy away, Lori's hands shaking as she handed over her license, the news crew capturing every moment. My parents had moved to stand behind me, my father's hand steady on my shoulder. Last thing," I said, my voice carrying over the commotion. "The earnest money you transferred yesterday? It's been frozen and will be used as restitution for your victims. And the Aurora Heights development?" I smiled. It doesn't exist. Consider it your final lesson in due diligence. Later, after the agents had gone and the guests had filed out, I stood alone in the ballroom. Rachel and Anna had hugged me before leaving, our shared victory, sweet but somehow hollow. My phone buzzed with messages, reporters wanting statements, family members expressing shock, lawyers offering services. I ignored them all and ordered a glass of champagne from the bar. Sitting in the empty ballroom, I toasted my reflection in the window. To financial acumen, I whispered using Lori's favorite phrase. The champagne tasted like victory. Tomorrow would bring chaos, legal proceedings, family fallout, media circus. But tonight, in this quiet moment, I savored the knowledge that I'd beaten them at their own game. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's making them face it in front of everyone they ever tried to impress. The headlines ran for weeks. Mother-son real estate duo charged in extensive fraud scheme. Prominent realtor's license revoked amid scandal. Local nurse exposes multi-year real estate scam. Channel 5's expose was particularly devastating. They interviewed all three of us, Anna, Rachel, and me, sitting together in the apartment where it all started. The reporter's voiceover was appropriately dramatic. Three women connected by one apartment and a scheme that would ultimately bring down one of the city's most prominent real estate families. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected, maybe because the evidence was so overwhelming, or maybe because Jeremy and Lori had made too many enemies over the years. Their fellow realtors were quick to distance themselves. Former clients came forward with their own stories, and suddenly the mother-son duo couldn't even get their calls returned. The IRS was merciless. The audit revealed over a decade of unreported rental income, hidden properties, and fraudulent tax returns. The penalties and back taxes topped $1,200,000. I watched from the courthouse steps as Lori, designer handbag conspicuously absent, was served with the final assessment. "But this is everything," she'd whispered, mascara smudging as she read the numbers. "We'll have to sell everything." "Funny how that works," I'd replied, walking past her to meet with my lawyer. The civil suit was almost an afterthought, but the judge was sympathetic. Triple damages meant I was awarded $72,000. Every penny I'd paid them tripled. Rachel and Anna received similar judgments. The properties were sold one by one. The Richardson Street complex, the Maple Avenue condos, and finally, sweet irony, Riverside Heights apartment 5A. I bought it at the foreclosure auction. No one else bid. The property's notorious history had scared away other buyers. I got it for a steal, just like they had years ago. But the best revenge wasn't the money or the properties. It was what I built from the ashes of their scheme. Collins Property Management became Second Chance Real Estate with a mission to help fraud victims navigate the real estate market. Anna's financial expertise, Rachel's banking connections, and my firsthand experience made us an unstoppable team. We specialized in helping women recover from financial fraud, offering classes on property investment and tenant rights. Our headquarters, apartment 5A, of course, we converted the second bedroom into an office where we met with clients who'd been scammed by other unscrupulous landlords. The living room, where I'd once served dinner to Jeremy and Lori while they plotted behind my back, became a classroom for our financial literacy workshops. The last time I saw Jeremy was at his sentencing. 5 years for fraud plus restitution. Lori got 3 years, her perfectly highlighted hair already showing gray at the roots. They couldn't look at me as they were led away. "Was it worth it?" Rachel asked as we left the courthouse, all the planning, the stress. I thought about the women who now filled our weekly support groups, each finding strength in sharing their stories. About the properties we'd helped them reclaim, the lives rebuilt from broken trust. "Look," I said, pointing to our office building across the street. The new sign gleamed in the sunlight. Second chance real estate where trust meets truth. Anna smiled, linking her arm through mine. Ready for another client meeting? Always, I replied, thinking of the scared, angry woman I'd been in that elevator with Mrs. Peterson. Everyone deserves a second chance, even if it's just a chance to start over. We crossed the street together, three women who'd turned victimhood into victory. Behind us, the courthouse doors closed on Jeremy and Lori's old life. Ahead of us, our office buzzed with new clients, new hopes, new beginnings. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. It's using your victory to help others win, too. That night, I sat in my office, formerly Jeremy and Lori's master bedroom, looking over new client files. The view of the park still took my breath away, but now it was mine, truly mine. On my desk sat a small plaque, a gift from our first successful client. Trust is earned, not paid for. I smiled, turning off the lights. Tomorrow would bring new clients, new stories, new chances to make things right. And somewhere in a prison cell, Jeremy and Lori would have plenty of time to think about the true cost of their creative financing.
Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed the story, hit subscribe so you never miss a new tale. Your support means the world. See you in the next chapter.